Good afternoon, everyone. Once again, we'd like to invite you, welcome you, I should say, here to St. John's Chapel for all of our visitors as we celebrate this kickoff event, if you will, for our Heritage Month. You know, Heritage Month is a time, in which we really kind of recognize, our inheritance. In fact, there's a great line too, right? It's that if we can see farther than our forefather, it's because we have to remember that we stand on the shoulders of giants. And in this case, right, it's not necessarily right our forefathers, but our foremothers, I would say. Right, because today we celebrate the feast day, right, of Saint Maria de Mattias. Right, she is the one who kicks off all of the inheritance that we have. Saint Maria de Mattias, who founded the Adorers of the Blood of Christ, as Sister talked about here in this introduction for this Mass, right, for this Heritage Month. And the thing that I really sat with in my prayer today, just kind of in reflecting upon the life of Saint Maria de Mattias, right, and what she means for us, members of the Newman University community, right, founded by the Adorers of the Blood of Christ, which was founded by Saint Maria de Mattias. The thing that I really wanted to dive into was her great devotion to the precious blood. Right? What was it specifically about that was the order that she founded, right? The Adorers of the precious blood. And the thing that I continued to come back to was that for her, Jesus Christ, the incarnation, right, the second person of the Holy Trinity, was not merely an idea, but a reality. She remembered, she understood, right, that Christ became present. And not only did he become present, but rather, right, he emptied himself on Calvary on that first Good Friday. That he emptied everything, right, and washed us in his precious blood, right? As Sister mentioned, she did not want one drop to be wasted. One of those great famous lines that she continually put forward. Right? For her, Christ was not merely an image or a philosophy or an ethical practice, but rather it was a person. And in fact, I couldn't help but think of a scene in a film that has deeply moved me. One I may have talked about in the past. It's a film that came out about 5 or 6 years ago called A Hidden Life. It's a film I revisit every single Lent. Because it's a tough movie. It tells the life of Blessed Franz Jägerstätter. He was a conscientious objector during the Second World War. He refused to pledge allegiance to Adolf Hitler and the Third Reich. And there's a scene that, again, it lives in my soul. A scene upon which Franz Jägerstätter enters into this beautiful church, and he's speaking to a painter who has these beautiful frescoes up on the ceiling. And the painter, right, he says, I come in here every day, right? And he says, I paint the tombs of the prophets. So the people like you and I, so that we can look up, right, and we can dream. Right? But the thing that he reminds us, right, is he says, right, we come in here, and he says, we forget that Christ's life is a demand. For us, right, when we see this, right, what he says is, he paints the comfortable Christ, right? He paints, right, this Christ who deep down we think, right, makes us feel good. But when we come to understand, what I think Saint Maria understood was that when we truly understand, we disciples of Jesus Christ, we who are called to follow Christ, as this painter in the scene says, right, not as an admirer, but as a follower, that when we come to understand what Christ's life was, as I think Saint Maria did, when we come to understand the reality of that event, that to follow him means to follow in the footsteps of the cross, it's then that we don't come to see Christ really as a means of comfort, but rather his life as a demand. Something that calls us, right, to conform ourselves to that very reality. And that's something that I believe Saint Maria did throughout the entirety of her life. She allowed Christ to transform her in a way that allowed her to lay down her life in self-sacrifice. Or in a way that allowed her to see her mission, her call, to continue the work of evangelization, to continue the work of education, right? To bring it, right, in a very tumultuous time. If you understand Italy of the early 19th century, it was not a peaceful time. It was not an easy time. Yet, because she understood the gift, right, that she had inherited, right, the gift, right, of Christ's precious blood that was poured out for her and for the whole world, she saw that, right, as a demand. And so I'd say for us today, as we celebrate the feast of St. Maria de Mattias, right, as we kick off, right, our Heritage Month, as we reflect upon all the gifts that we have inherited, may we look to her example. May we ask for her intercession to see, right, as that church painter saw in that great movie, A Hidden Life, that Christ's life, it's a demand. And that Christ didn't come to find admirers, but to find followers, like St. Maria de Mattias before us.